Well, we come now to the meat, as it were, our speakers. We've got Irene and Jock, and Ian is going to come and introduce them, and then they're going to give us half an hour delight.
It's only going to be a very brief introduction because I don't want to eat into their time, but there's been an awful lot of highlights for me in my time in the fellowship, times of joy, times of encouragement, times of sadness as well, but like Burns's funeral a few weeks ago. But there's always been joy and substance in them. And possibly the highlight, if you look at it in literary terms, was the privilege of being at the book launch of what we're just going to hear about. Fran, Liz and I had the great pleasure and privilege of being at the launch at Waterston's, seems a long time ago, 3 months ago or something like that. And it was marvellous, and I really do look forward to this. We are in for a treat. Thank you.
Well, this is a privilege, and it's an especial pleasure for me, for Jock and I have been friends for over 50 years now, although neither of us looks old enough. The poems are about the First World War. I wanted to write something to mark the armistice. I knew there was nothing I could possibly add to what has been written about the war itself. But I thought, having an imagination, I could perhaps write something about the home front. And that's exactly what I did. It's a series of poems set in a Scottish village and centred on a man that you'll get to know in the course of the next half hour. Jock and I have been friends for a long time, as I said, but over the last 7 years, Jock has been much more interested in poetry, and we share poems very regularly by email. But it was a bit of a surprise for me what happened when we had lunch, interestingly, at the conference in November.
Irene, it wasn't I had it in mind. I mean, I've so respected what Irene's been doing for a long time that when I realised I'm doing a series of poetry books now, so the obvious person to go to is sitting next to me. So I asked you if you would just do some poems. Is that what you're thinking of?
Yes, that's right. And you were vague. You didn't suggest the Tam poems, although you'd read them. But they were the obvious ones, because I know of your interest in Scots.
Yes, I have actually tried to start writing in Scots, and my secret of writing in Scots is that I have an advisor behind the scenes.
I'm used to getting poems in Scots with idiosyncrasies, shall we say. But you invited me to be published by Hansel.
Indeed. Do you want me to say a wee bit about Hansel Press?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, it was set up in 1976. I actually got a letter when I was out in Kenya from Professor Tom Torrance suggesting that we did this. So it was set up in 1976 to publish academic books, serious, big stuff, written from the center of Christian faith. That means books which are essentially orthodox and Trinitarian, but also books which were on the frontier between Christian theology and other disciplines, such as sciences, art, music, history. And because of something that happened with the person who was running it, I found myself at virtually a day's notice running the press in 1991. It was a pretty steep learning curve, discovering how to typeset and all the rest of it. Now, in the early years, we operated as a normal publisher, stocking and selling books ourselves, but from about 2000 to 2015, we stopped that and simply did books for authors who were writing something good that I knew a normal publisher wouldn't nowadays handle, though they might have 10, 20, 30 years ago. So those authors have to sell the books from their own garage. And some people, especially the late Bishop of Aberdeen, has been extremely successful in doing that. Now, we still do that. But with my own growing interest in poetry, which I really started writing seriously when I got to the age of 70, I recommend it for people my age. A couple of years ago, we started publishing this new series of Hansel poetry books. Now, you were asking how this happened. Indeed, Irene and I had started sending each other poems. It was when I discovered that she hadn't actually had poems published, though she's had ever so many books published. That was when I asked you if you'd do a booklet. And she said yes. So this is it. It's number 2 in the series. It's on sale, of course, through there. Number 3 is by Rosemary Hector. Number 4, I think, will be my own. And number 5, someone was talking about Gaelic books. Number 5 is going to be in Diglot, Gaelic and English, by a fellow called Miles Campbell. But this one is in Diglot, Scots and English, and that's what Irene and I are going to read from now.
And it will be no surprise at all that I'll do the Scots. The pellock that felled Franz Ferdinand skited round the world, felling in round numbers 11 million soldiers, 7 million other folk. They were no round numbers. They were Sergei, nae lang triced it to Masha, Stuart, wha shucht in Keel afore he quat, Mary Therese, mother o' twa, Fritz, lewd lad o old Frau Kruger, a bairnie, taking her very first sook, and her mother. They must put our blood on their women and weans. Even they were sair wondered, but the pellock that felled Franz Ferdinand and skited round the world.
The bullet that killed Franz Ferdinand ricocheted round the world, killing in round numbers 11 million servicemen, 7 million others. They were not round numbers. They were Sergei, newly engaged to Masha, Stuart, who planted kale before he left, Marie-Therese, mother of 2, Fritz, much-loved son of old Frau Kruger, a newborn infant, suckling for the very first time, and her mother. The survivors' pain wounded their wives and children. They too were grievously hurt by the bullet that killed Franz Ferdinand and ricocheted round the world.
Tam is the focus of the book. He's completely fictitious, but to me he's real. He was born in 1895, so he was a young man when the war broke out. You're going to meet him now. He was nae lang at skill when Tam was called Tim Heeded. But Tim Heeded he was nae, though Booklear was a yontim. In with the meesters warsel and all Tam's etlands, it wouldna go in. But the hinnermas lausen Tam had nae meer Booklear than when he started. But he'd enough to begin on wi', strong arms, a hamely heart, and a dumfinnerin good way o' mindin' things. When Tam's friends marched after war, he was left ahin with the women and weans. Look after them for us, Tam, they scropped, shoulder in their knapsacks. We'll be hame gin Yule. Women and weans were soft in Tam's arms, and he gave a lift to them always. Fashion water, up hadden dykes, thin and neeps, carrying wichts and wains and worries.
He wasn't long at school when Tam was called empty-headed. But empty-headed he was not, though book learning was beyond him. Even with the teacher's hard work and all Tam's efforts, it wouldn't go in. By his last day at school, Tam had no more book learning than when he started. But he had plenty to be going on with. Strong arms, a good heart, and an amazing ability to remember things. When Tam's friends marched off to war, he was left with the women and children. "Look after them for us, Tam," they yelled, shouldering their knapsacks. "We'll be home by Christmas." Women and children were safe in Tam's hands. He did everything he could for them, fetching water, mending dykes, thinning turnips, carrying heavy loads and children and worries.
When the worst spearings came, Tam was there to move to the women what he minded. What trees the wood had comfy for the sparkles, where they'd been whittled, what had been whippled, and to show them the hidden branches where curved hearts twined names together. Women tak tent and grat, for Ypres, Verdun, the Somme, for focusts and empty arms. And Tam was there for winds as well. He telt them the recht way out, of feathers gaddling for truties, of pockled apples that made them sick, of cushies doos shut down wi' catties a deadly ert, and harned out a bleeze in the woods. The herts tea. He showed them the herts.
When the worst news came, Tam was there to tell the women what he remembered, what trees the wood had come from for their wooden spoons, where they were whittled, what had been whistled, and to show them the hidden branches where carved hearts twined names together. Women listened and wept for Ypres, Verdun, the Somme, for full coffins and empty arms. And Tam was there for the children as well. He told them true stories of fathers fishing for trout, of stolen apples that made them sick, of pigeons being shot down by catapults, a deadly art, and roasted over a fire in the woods. The hearts, too. He showed them the hearts.
The next poem is called The Cracked Cup, and Tam himself is the cracked cup. He is broken, but still beautiful and still useful. When his friends get after war, Tam mended dykes and milked coos, howked tatties and set in kale, he gave abody a hon. When the worst o' news rocked hame, and women hearkened that their menfolk were dead, Tam thocht and better thocht what he could do to gie them easement. The sun was blistering hot the day when news came for Kate. Tam picked up his yin chiny cup, a cracked cup. He filled it with water and gaed to see her. The widow grat off with tears, burning like the sun. Tam sat quite aside her. When she stopped, he gave her his water. Kate had at the cup in trembly hands, taken tent of the water dropping out of the tapwood, and took a sip. It ran out her thrapple, loosened her tongue, and she sat and told Tam about Davy.
When his friends went off to war, Tam mended dykes and milked cows, harvested potatoes and planted kale. He helped one and helped all. When the worst news reached home and women heard that their menfolk were dead, Tam puzzled over what he could do to comfort them. The sun was blistering hot when news came for Kate. Tam picked up his one china cup, a cracked cup, filled it with water, and went to see her. The widow wept terrible tears, burning like the sun. Tam sat quietly beside her. When she stopped weeping, he gave her his cup of water. Kate held the cup in trembling hands, watched the water splashing out of it, and took a sip. It ran over her throat, loosened her tongue, and she sat and told Tam about Davy.
When Wally came home from the war, he came in his lane for Watty, his brother, was dead. No yins, no een yins did he quo Watty's name. He hardly said ocht at all, but swear at his wains for their yommerance. Jenny ettled to make him talk, but he wouldn't. He couldn't. His heart and his tongue were snacket. Yin poor and wat day, Tam went to the linn. Wally hunket na bowder, didn't he see him? Take Tam crooked his horse aside him. Een fixed in a stain on the foreside, Wally started to speak quietly. We went o'er the tap together into hell, he said.
When Wally came home from the war, he came alone, for Watty, his brother, was dead. Not once, not even once, did he say Watty's name. He hardly spoke at all, apart from swearing at his children for their noise. Jenny tried to make him talk, but he wouldn't. He couldn't. His heart and his tongue were locked. One pouring wet day, Tam went to the pool. Wally, huddled on a boulder, didn't see him till Tam crouched down beside him. Eyes fixed on a stone on the far side, Wally started to speak quietly. We went over the top together into hell, he said.
Een fixed in a stain on the far side, Willie started to speak quietly. We went o'er the tap together into hell, he said. When it deed done, I spied Watty lying there, staring at me glaikit like. Squeaming o'er, I raxed out my horn for his. But there was nae horn, nae arm, just his head, lying like the stain in the glare. A good while goodbye. We Willie snacket in his war, and his family snacket in theirs. Then one day, Tam went to the linn and found Willie there afore him, lying, sprachelt in the water, dead, with his arm round the stain on the other side.
Eyes fixed on a stone on the far side, Wally started to speak quietly. We went over the top together into hell, he said. When the battle died down, I saw Watty lying there staring at me with a stupid grin on his face. Squirming over, I reached out my hand for his. There was no hand, no arm, just his head lying like that stone in the mud. Some time went past, with Wally locked in his war and his family locked in theirs. Then one day, Tam went to the pool and found Wally there before him, lying sprawled in the water, dead, with his arm around the stone on the other side.
That poem is truthful 2 times over. The circumstances are true to an account of 2 soldiers who one was lost and his head was found by his brother. And the story is told in the museum, the Devil's Porridge, down in Galloway. The other truth is that after the First World War, my grandfather came home shell-shocked. And like thousands of other Scotsmen, he killed himself sometime afterwards. And by doing that, it's a strange thing. I wasn't born till after the Second World War, but the First World War had a huge impact on my life through what my grandfather did, and who could blame him? Do you remember the carved hearts in the second poem? We're going to visit them again. The trees in the wood stood prood, their carved hearts twining names together. Sabbath by Sabbath, women donner doon to had tryst with their mindings. Maisie whiles took Morag where, mother telling dochter about her father afore the war. You never kent the chiel I married, quo Maisie, but it was many a long year afore Morag understood. Wattie and Willie's widdies gaed together, sisters married to brothers, sisters sair vexed. The hearts gave them easement, the hearts let them greet. Kate had married again and brought her man to see what Davy had carved. She was prideful of the inn she loved and lost at Ypres. There was nae heart for Tam, nae name twined wi' his, but there was ludgeon in ilka heart, a welcome at ilka hearth.
The trees in the wood stood tall, their carved hearts joining names together. Sunday by Sunday, women wandered down to meet there with their memories. Maisie sometimes took Morag with her, mother telling daughter about her father before the war. You never knew the man I married, said Maisie, but it took many long years before Morag understood what she meant. Wattie and Wally's widows went together, sisters married to brothers, sisters still in deep distress. The hearts gave them some comfort, the hearts allowed them to weep. Kate, who had married again, brought her new husband to see what Davy had carved. She was proud of the one she lost at Ypres. There was no heart for Tam, no name entwined with his, but there was a place in every heart, a welcome at every fireside.
We're going to move briefly to the Second World War. I was born 2 years after the end of the war. My father served in the war. He never, ever, ever spoke about it, not a single word. But he had a curious habit, and that was that all the time my father was in the house, a tap had to be running. He turned the tap on as soon as he came in, and somebody turned it off after he went out. It ran all day and all night if he was in the house, all day and all night. He was a crabbit man. I loved my father, but to be fair, he was a crabbit man. And once I said to my mother, and I was just maybe 12 or 13, and it troubles me that I even asked, why did you marry my dad? And her response was, Irene, you never knew the man I married. And we're not too different in age, and there may be others here who never knew the man their mother married. And I said to her once, Mum, why does Dad, I said to her a dozen times, I'm sure, why does Dad leave the tap running? And she said, Irene, there wasn't always water in Egypt. He's still washing away the sand. We're going back to the First World War again, or a few years after it, and we're going to meet some teenagers whose dads didn't come back. The Scots for teenager is Hoflin, Hofgroen, it's a lovely word. Meest afternoons Tam raked the woods, gathering kennelin and dirkins to gie a bleeze. Whiles ane of the Hoflins would come up and ent him, and Tam jaloused he needed a crack. Do you mind my father when he was my age? Lads speared, yin after t'other. Aye, Tam said, I mind him. And then, like a cove wi' its head in a bowie, ilka lad would lap up all Tam could tell. Often they ended at the burn to content of the water, while the druth in Hofland's herts was sleep. Come their perton, Tam would had ilkians in, langer than was canny for ordiner. There were things said atween in that couldn't be put into words.
Most afternoons, Tam walked the woods gathering kindling and fir cones to give a blaze. Sometimes a young lad would draw alongside him, and Tam understood that he needed to talk. "Do you remember my dad when he was my age?" Teenagers asked, one after the other. "Yes," Tam would say, "I remember him." And then, like a calf with its head in a milk pail, each lad would lap up all Tam could tell. Often they ended beside the stream, watching the water, while the thirst in young men's hearts was satisfied. When they parted, Tam held their eyes longer than would normally be comfortable. There were things said between eyes that couldn't be put into words.
After the war was fought and won, the young laird come home. Folk were proud of their major, and even prouder when they minded where they were and gave them the time o' day. Yen afternoon he met Tam in the woods. "Did you have a good war, Tam?" spurred the major. Tam looked him in the eye. The king had naething I could do for him, quo he quietly. Red-faced at his doufness, the major changed onto other things. When he met the minister, the major told what Tam had said, and whose seek sorry he was to ask. It took the minister mair nor an hour to tell about Tam's war, and the young laird was the better o't. A when a years on, Tam get hame, slipping quietly away in his bed. Abody was at the kirkyard, fae oud folk to Hoflands. Afore the minister spak, the major told who Tam had seen his war. There was hardly a yen whose een warna watchod. When all was done, the minister raxed up his arms, the yen was king had naething for him today, and lippen Tam for aye to his meester.
After the war was fought and won, the young squire came home. Villagers were proud of their major, and even more proud when he remembered who they were and talked to them in the passing. One afternoon he met Tam in the woods. "Did you have a good war?" asked the major. Tam looked at him directly. "The king had nothing I could do for him," he replied quietly. Red-faced at his stupidity, the major changed the subject to other things. When he met the minister, the major told him what Tam had said and how heart-sorry he was to have asked. It took the minister more than an hour to tell about Tam's war, and it did the young man good. Some years later, Tam died, slipping away quietly in his bed. Everyone was at the churchyard, both old and young. Before the minister began, the major spoke about how Tam had seen his war. There was hardly a person there whose eyes did not fill with tears. When everything was over, the minister raised his arms over the one whose king had nothing for him to do, and entrusted Tam forever to his master.
After the book was published, a book is only of any use when it is read. So one has to start thinking about, well, we started thinking about that beforehand, didn't we? And I've been speaking at women's guilds, history societies, and other groups over the last few months particularly up to this weekend, and it's particularly pertinent that it should be this weekend we have this presentation. And it has been quite extraordinary how many times I've been aware of people weeping, because as they reflect my experience to a very tiny degree, they also affect other people's, they touch other people's experience. So from my point of view, it has been a very moving few months. I've spoken twice this week already before today at two women's guilds. I hope it's going well enough to please Jock.
Indeed, we've reprinted, and I'm so delighted that Irene has been able to continue this kind of ministry. I tried the BBC, I tried the British Legion, got no interest whatsoever. But I think it's a question of who you know, really, in these circles. But Irene, bless you for the work you've been doing with it. It really is a ministry.
I would like to thank you publicly, Jock, just for being you, for being a friend, and for facilitating the publication. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you.
Well, I don't know about you, but I feel a bit kind of emotional and not. I don't really want to be standing here in public. I want to go into a corner and just feel reflective, and so much. There was such depth in that, and I'm sure it touched lots of us. Really a splendid piece of work. Thank you so much for sharing it today. And I presume you've got copies for sale next door, Irene?